The transaction took place in broad daylight, but something about it felt darker than midnight. I counted gold eagles one by one into Jeremiah Mill's outstretched palm, while the boy, couldn't have been more than 16, stood between us like cattle at auction, with each coin droppin'. I watched another piece of his spirit crumble away. The other folks in Promise Creek pretended not to notice, but their sideways glances told the truth of what they thought. Another human being sold like property in a territory where such things weren't supposed to happen anymore. What none of them knew was why I was there. Hope Blackwood, the lone rancher of Whispering Canyon, was buying a boy with coin that had taken years to save. They couldn't see the rope scars hidden beneath my sleeve, identical to the ones peeking out from under the boy's too short cuffs. They couldn't know that 15 years ago, I'd stood exactly where he stood now, with no one to save me. Before we dive into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how our stories bring people together from every corner of the world. The transaction took place in broad daylight, but something about it felt darker than midnight. I counted gold eagles one by one into Jeremiah Mills's outstretched palm, while the boy, couldn't have been more than 16, stood between us like cattle at auction, with each coin droppin'. I watched another piece of his spirit crumble away. My name's Hope Blackwood. Most folks round these parts know me as the lone rancher who settled in Whispering Canyon 5 years back. What they don't know is why I stood witness to the sellin' of a human being on this particular day. "He's big enough for the heavy work," Jeremiah said, nodding toward his son while wiping sweat from his sunburned face. "Eats more'n his share, but he'll earn his keep." The boy, Samuel was his name, kept his eyes fixed on his worn boots, his oversized clothes hanging loose on his heavy frame. The fabric was patched so many times it resembled a quilt more than proper clothing. His father's words seemed to cut deeper than any physical blow. My weathered hands remained steady as I placed the final coin in Jeremiah's palm. "Our arrangement is settled then," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Samuel dared to look up at me then, searching my face for some indication of what awaited him. But I've spent years perfecting a mask that reveals nothing of the thoughts churning beneath. The silence stretched between us like a taut rope on the brink of snapping. Jeremiah pocketed my money with obvious satisfaction, already thinking about the whiskey he'd buy at Widow Parker's saloon. He didn't even say goodbye to his son, just climbed into his wagon and disappeared in a cloud of dust that seemed to hang in the air long after he was gone. And so it was just me and Samuel, standing in the empty street of Promise Creek, a town too small for most maps and too broken for much hope. "Pick up your things," I said finally. Samuel clutched a small bundle to his chest like it contained all the treasure in the West. I saw it held a worn Bible with a faded inscription, a hand-carved wooden horse missing one leg, and a daguerreotype of a woman with Samuel's eyes. The ride to my ranch was long and quiet. Samuel sat as far from me as the wagon seat allowed. Every few minutes, I caught him stealing glances my way, trying to figure what kind of man had just purchased him. As we crested Whispering Ridge, I noticed his sharp intake of breath. Ravenwood Ranch stretched across the valley below, far larger than most folks expected when they heard of the lone rancher of Whispering Canyon. "You built all this yourself?" Samuel asked, his voice barely audible above the wind. "Every post, every plank," I answered, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. I felt him watching me, searching for answers I wasn't ready to give. My hand unconsciously moved to my wrist, where the rope scars from another life remained hidden beneath my sleeve. I noticed identical marks peeking out from Samuel's too short cuffs. from the shadows of the general store. Sheriff Caldwell watched our departure, his expression unreadable. On his desk back in town, a telegram about my past waited, evidence of a history I'd tried to bury as deep as the gold that paid for Samuel's freedom. As we approached the main house, a woman emerged from the front door. Sarah McCready was about 40, with hair the color of iron and eyes that missed nothing. She'd managed my household since I arrived in these parts, and the look on her face when she spotted Samuel told me I had some explaining to do. "Mr. Blackwood," Sarah approached, her gaze moving between me and Samuel with obvious questions. "I wasn't expecting company." "Not company," I replied. "Samuel will be staying with us permanently. Please prepare the room in the east wing." Sarah's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd worked for me long enough to recognize when there was more to the story than I was letting on. "And what will be the boys' duties here?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. I helped Samuel down from the wagon, a gesture that seemed to surprise him. His father had likely never shown such consideration, and the boy hesitated before accepting my outstretched hand. "Samuel, this is Mrs. McCready. She runs things when I'm away." The East Wing room was nothing fancy. Clean pine furniture, a bed with fresh linens, writing desk with paper and pencils, bookshelf with actual books, window overlooking the eastern pasture. But from Samuel's face, you'd think I'd shown him the governor's mansion. "This is for me?" he asked, his voice small with disbelief. "A man needs a place to think his own thoughts," I replied simply. He placed his bundle on the bed with such care, like he feared it might all disappear if he moved too suddenly. Dinner that evening was a quiet affair. Sarah served a hearty stew, but Samuel just pushed the food around his plate. "On this ranch, every man works hard and eats accordingly," I said. "There's no shame in being hungry after a long day." He began to eat slowly at first. Then, with increasing hunger, I pretended not to notice when he slipped a piece of bread into his pocket, a survival habit I recognized all too well. Later that night, Sarah confronted me in my study while Samuel slept. "What are you doing, Hope?" she asked, using my first name as she only did in private. "You know how people will talk." "Let them talk," I replied, staring out at the mountains silhouetted against the night sky. "It's not just talk I'm worried about. There are those who would use this against you, who remember the rumors about your past." Before I could answer, we heard Samuel cry out in his sleep. I moved quickly to his room and found him tangled in the sheets, muttering about the mines, though I knew he'd never worked in any mine. When I helped him settle, his nightshirt shifted, revealing whip scars across his back. A controlled anger rose in me, quickly masked as the boy drifted back to sleep. Returning to my study, I found Sarah holding a wanted poster she'd discovered in my desk drawer. The face resembled mine, but bore a different name, Elijah Walker. "There are things you don't know, Sarah," I said quietly. "Then perhaps it's time you told me," she replied. Outside, one of my ranch hands reported riders watching the property from the ridge. That night, I wrote a letter by lamplight, addressed to Marshall, asking about records from the Silverton Mine Company. 1861. I sealed it with wax and hid it in a compartment under a floorboard. Dawn found me still standing guard at Samuel's door, silhouetted against the window, watching for shadows that carried my past. Sheriff Caldwell arrived the next morning with 2 deputies, their horses kicking up dust visible from half a mile away. I greeted them on the porch, maintaining a calm exterior despite the tension humming through my body. "Hope," Caldwell nodded, his weathered face revealing nothing of his thoughts. The deputies positioned themselves strategically, hands near their weapons. Samuel emerged from the house, his nervous posture and fidgeting hands betraying his anxiety. "I'd like to speak with the boy," Caldwell said. "Alone." I watched from the porch as they walked to the shade of an oak tree. My knuckles turned white on the railing as memories surfaced. Another lawman. Another questioning. Years ago. Sarah moved around the deputies with deliberate hospitality, offering coffee they didn't want. Meanwhile, they conducted a not-so-subtle search of the property. One discovered my hidden cache of gold coins and ammunition under the floorboards in my study. "Frontier living requires precautions," I explained when confronted. Samuel and Caldwell returned to the porch. The boy stood taller than when he'd left. "I told him I'm here of my own choice," Samuel announced. "A boy your age has limited choices," Caldwell replied skeptically. "He gave me more choice than my father ever did," Samuel countered with unexpected eloquence. The sheriff studied him carefully before turning to me. "This arrangement exists in a legal gray area. Hope, I'll be back to check on the boy's welfare." As they rode away, I felt a mixture of relief and respect for Samuel's courage. "You didn't have to defend me," I told him. "You didn't have to buy me," he responded. "But here we are." A week later, we traveled to Promise Creek for supplies. The hostile reception was immediate. Conversation stopping when we entered, mothers pulling children aside. Whispers followed us. "The man who buys children," and "heard he was worse before he came here." The general store owner, Jenkins, refused to serve us outright. "Your kind ain't welcome here," he said coldly. "Your goods aren't the only ones in the territory, Mr. Jenkins," I replied with forced calm. We purchased our supplies at Widow Parker's smaller store instead. As we loaded the wagon, Samuel asked, "Why do they hate you?" "People fear what they don't understand," I answered, not ready to tell him the whole truth. Over the following weeks, I began teaching Samuel ranch work, riding, roping, mending fences. His initial clumsiness gave way to growing confidence. When he successfully completed his first difficult task, I gave him a pair of proper boots. "Why did you really buy me from my father?" he asked one evening. "That's a story for when we know each other better," I replied. That night in Widow Parker's saloon, Jeremiah Mills drank heavily, boasting about his shrewd business deal. 3 rough-looking strangers paid close attention, examining a crude map of Ravenwood Ranch. One reacted strongly to hearing my name at dinner. Samuel mentioned recognizing one of those men as someone who used to visit their home. Meanwhile, Sarah discovered an old newspaper clipping in my study about a mine collapse that killed 12 men in Colorado. The name Elijah Walker appeared as a key witness. The next morning, I discovered my saddle had been tampered with, a calculated cut in the leather that would break at the worst possible moment. I replaced it silently, my expression grim. The past I'd tried to outrun was closing in, and I'd brought Samuel right into its path. The ranch lay quiet under the midnight sky, but sleep eluded me. I sat in my study cleaning my rifle by lamplight when I heard a horse approaching at full gallop. The rider was slumped over, barely staying in the saddle. I rushed outside, weapons ready, and caught the man as he fell. Recognition hit me like a physical blow. "Marshal, what happened to you?" Blood soaked his shirt from a gunshot wound in his side. "Jenkins," he gasped. "Asking questions again. Found you." He clutched my arm. "They know about the boy." I felt a presence behind me and turned to find Samuel standing there, his face pale in the moonlight. He'd heard everything. "There are things you need to know," I told him as we carried Marshall inside, after ensuring Marshall was stable under Sarah's care. I led Samuel to the barn, beneath the hay storage. A trapdoor revealed a small room containing maps, legal papers, newspaper clippings, and journals. Before I came here, I worked for the Silverton Mine Company, I explained, searching through documents. I discovered the owner, Jenkins Sr., was ignoring dangerous conditions. When I reported it, he threatened me. Then the cave-in happened. 12 men died, including my father. I handed Samuel a yellowed newspaper. I testified against Jenkins. His son has been hunting me ever since. And my father? Samuel asked quietly. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I fear he's connected somehow. 2 weeks later, Jeremiah Mills appeared at Ravenwood, alone and seemingly sober. He looked different, clean-shaven, new clothes, a humble demeanor I'd never seen before. I've come to apologize to my boy, he claimed, requesting to speak with Samuel alone. I reluctantly agreed, but watched from a distance as they talked on the porch. The conversation started civilly enough, but I noticed Jeremiah's casual questions about the ranch, my habits, and especially where I kept my money. Samuel's posture gradually stiffened as he realized his father's true purpose. When he began challenging Jeremiah's sincerity, the man's facade crumbled. That man stole everything from the Jenkins family, Jeremiah hissed, grabbing Samuel's arm. They're paying good money for information about him. He bought me fair, Samuel shot back, which is more than you ever did. I intervened before things escalated further, rifle in hand, but not raised. Time for you to leave, Jeremiah. As he mounted his horse, he spat a final threat. You've chosen your side, boy. Remember that when they come. After he'd gone, Samuel stood, shaking with anger and hurt. I placed a hand on his shoulder. A man proves his worth by his choices, not his blood. We began fortifying the ranch immediately, boarding certain windows, establishing defensive positions, preparing escape routes. I taught Samuel to shoot, despite Sarah's objections. I'd rather he know and never need to than need to and not know, I told her. I sent Sarah to town with documentation of Jenkins's threats and Jeremiah's involvement, sealed in a letter for Sheriff Caldwell. Hours passed with no word from her. That evening, we discovered one of my trusted ranch hands, Miguel, had disappeared, his belongings gone from the bunkhouse. Samuel found wanted posters identifying me as Elijah Walker while searching for ammunition in my study. As night fell, an orange glow appeared on the northern horizon. They fired the north pasture, I said grimly. It was a diversion, drawing our attention and resources away from the main ranch. I handed Samuel a loaded rifle. Stay in the house. Shoot anyone who comes through that door who isn't me or Sarah. His face was pale but determined as he took position at an upstairs window. In just weeks, he'd transformed from an unwanted boy to the defender of his new home. The sound of approaching horses drifted through the darkness as the fire grew. The north pasture blazed against the night sky, casting an apocalyptic glow over Ravenwood. I organized the remaining ranch hands to contain the fire while maintaining our defenses. Through the smoke, I spotted Jeremiah leading 5 riders toward the main house from the west, opposite the fire. They're using the smoke as cover, I shouted, taking position behind an overturned wagon. The night erupted in gunfire. I expected Samuel to freeze, but when I glanced toward the house, I saw him at the window, his rifle steady. His first shot drove an attacker back behind a water trough. I gave him a quick nod of approval before returning fire. Jeremiah's voice carried through the chaos, loosened by whiskey and hatred. Walker should have died in that mine with the rest of them. A bullet splintered the wagon beside me. I motioned for Samuel to join me, and he slipped out the side door, staying low until he reached my position. "My real name is Elijah Walker," I told him between shots. "I was foreman at Silverton Mine." When I reported unsafe conditions, Jenkins Sr. dismissed my concerns. After the collapse, I testified against him. His supporters framed me for murder. Samuel loaded his rifle calmly. "You bought me because someone once treated you like property, too. No one deserves to be sold," I confirmed simply. An attacker threw a flaming torch onto the barn roof. The dry wood caught quickly, threatening the horses trapped inside. "I'll get the horses," Samuel shouted, already running toward the burning structure before I could stop him. I instructed 2 ranch hands to cover him while I maintained defense of the house. Through the smoke, I saw Samuel leading panicked horses from the burning barn, his face streaked with soot but determined. From the corner of my eye, I spotted Jeremiah breaking from cover toward the main house. Before I could adjust my aim, another attacker forced me to take cover. A shout from the east caught everyone's attention. Sarah was riding hard toward the ranch, her clothes torn from her escape from captivity. Jeremiah changed course to intercept her, pulling her roughly from her horse and using her as a shield while advancing toward the house. "Drop your weapon, Walker." I held my fire, unwilling to risk hitting Sarah. Jeremiah forced his way into the house, dragging her with him. I followed cautiously, finding them in my study. "Where's the gold?" Jeremiah demanded, pressing a knife to Sarah's throat. "There is no hidden gold," I said calmly. "Just what I earned honestly over years of work." Liar. So that was the connection. Jeremiah had been on Jenkins' payroll all along. His resentment at being ignored while my testimony was believed had festered for years. Samuel appeared silently in the doorway behind his father. Our eyes met briefly before Sarah seized the momentary distraction to break free. In the chaos that followed, Jeremiah lunged at me with his knife. Samuel didn't shoot his father. Instead, he used his size and newfound strength to tackle him to the ground, restraining him until I could secure his weapons outside. We heard new riders approaching, Sheriff Caldwell and his deputies, alerted by a loyal ranch hand who'd made it to town. The remaining attackers surrendered when surrounded by lawmen. As dawn broke over the smoldering ruins of the barn, Albert Jenkins himself appeared, having stayed safely away during the fighting. His confident manner faltered when Sheriff Caldwell announced, "Albert Jenkins, you're under arrest." The documentation about the mine collapse had finally reached the proper authorities. As Jenkins was led away in handcuffs, he glared at me with undisguised hatred. Samuel stood beside me, watching the prisoners being taken away. The first light of morning illuminated his face, no longer a boy being sold, but a young man who had found his worth. 1 week after the attack, Ravenwood Ranch was slowly coming back to life. The charred remains of the barn had been cleared away, and the frame of a new, larger structure was already rising. Neighboring ranchers had come to help with repairs, bringing lumber, tools, and extra hands. Samuel worked alongside men twice his age, his confidence and strength growing daily. I supervised, but also worked beside everyone else, determined that Ravenwood would emerge stronger than before. Despite my initial instinct to withdraw after my identity was exposed, Sarah had firmly pushed me to face things directly. "Hiding is what got you here," she'd said. "Truth is the only way forward." Samuel visited Jeremiah in the town jail regularly, despite everything. I didn't understand it at first, but I respected his choice. The difficult conversations between father and son were part of Samuel's healing, even if they weren't always peaceful. Sheriff Caldwell and Judge Wilson arrived at Ravenwood one afternoon, bringing official documents and grave expressions. We met in my restored study, where papers spread across my desk told the full story of the Silverton mine disaster. These witness statements prove Jenkins Sr. orchestrated the frame-up, Judge Wilson explained. You're fully exonerated, Mr. Walker, or do you prefer Blackwood now? Blackwood, I replied. Elijah Walker died in that mine alongside the others. The judge nodded understanding. Now, regarding the boy. He held up another document. His guardianship presents complex legal questions. Samuel spoke for himself, his testimony clear and direct. I choose to stay at Ravenwood, he stated firmly. Whatever legal words you need to make that happen, that's what I want. Word came from town that Jeremiah's wounds had worsened, infection setting in. Samuel and I rode to Promise Creek immediately. The doctor's prognosis was grim as we arrived at the jail. Jeremiah lay pale and sweating on his cot, barely recognizable from the man who had sold his son weeks earlier. He asked to speak with Samuel alone. I hesitated, but respected Samuel's decision to hear his father out. Their private conversation lasted nearly an hour. When Samuel emerged, his expression was complicated. Not forgiveness exactly, but perhaps understanding. He was paid to intimidate witnesses against testifying about the mine, Samuel told me later. And he said my mother didn't die like he told me. She left because of his abuse. He couldn't stand seeing her in my face every day. The revelation seemed to lift a weight from Samuel's shoulders, not because it excused his father's actions, but because it confirmed they weren't his fault. A town meeting was called in the Promise Creek Church to discuss my standing in the community now that my true identity was known. Initial hostility from those who felt deceived gradually shifted as facts emerged through testimony. Samuel spoke with unexpected eloquence in my defense. He didn't just buy me, he showed me what it means to be valued. The simple but powerful statement cut through legal complexities, reaching the human hearts of the townsfolk. Even Jenkins' widow had to acknowledge the truth. Though bitterly, as we rode home, Samuel asked, "What happens now?" "That," I told him, "is entirely up to you." 1 year later, spring bloomed across Ravenwood Ranch. The new barn stood larger and stronger than its predecessor. Additional grazing land acquired from a neighboring property expanded our operation considerably. Samuel, no longer the uncertain boy I'd purchased in Promise Creek, had developed into a capable young man with a particular gift for horses. I watched from the corral fence as he worked with a spirited colt, his movements confident and gentle. The ranch hands now looked to him naturally as second in command, and he'd started a small but successful horse breeding program. "He's a credit to you," Sarah observed, joining me at the fence. Her courtship with the widowed doctor from Promise Creek had brought a new softness to her iron demeanor. "He's a credit to himself," I corrected. The sound of an approaching stagecoach, unusual for our remote location, drew our attention. A woman descended, early 40s, with Samuel's eyes and hair. Elizabeth Mills had followed the news of the attack on Ravenwood all the way from Santa Fe. The reunion between mother and son played out across the yard, hesitation, recognition, and finally an embrace that spoke of years of separation and searching. "Jeremiah told me you'd died," Samuel said through tears, "and he told me you'd moved so many times I could never find you," she replied. I never stopped looking. That evening, we gathered in the study, maps and ledgers spread across my desk. When you turn 21, I told Samuel, I want to make you full partner in Ravenwood. His expression of disbelief mirrored the day I'd first shown him his room. Why would you do that? I built this place hoping for something I couldn't name, I explained. I think it was waiting for you. We created a new brand for our joint venture, combining Samuel's carved wooden horse with my original ranch mark, a symbolic joining of our separate pasts into a shared future. News arrived that Jeremiah was rehabilitating in prison, working in the infirmary with unexpected skill. His letters to Samuel showed small steps toward change, not dramatic transformation, but movement in the right direction. As the sun set over Whispering Canyon one evening, Samuel and I sat on the porch in comfortable silence. The question that had waited a year finally came. Why did you really buy me from my father? I considered carefully before answering. Because 15 years ago, I was standing where you stood, and there was no one to do for me what I did for you. I couldn't save that boy I was, but I could save you. In doing so, perhaps I saved us both. Samuel nodded, understanding completely. Do you ever regret it? Taking such a risk on someone you didn't know? I smiled in the fading light. Some risks aren't choices, Samuel. They're obligations to the people we hope to become. A month later, a letter arrived from a mining company with a lucrative offer to purchase part of our land. Without discussion, we both knew our answer would be no. Our commitment to ranching and the land's integrity far outweighed any promise of easy profit. In the evenings, Samuel began writing down our story. When I discovered the manuscript pages, I read them privately, moved by seeing our journey through his eyes. The first line caught in my throat. The transaction took place in broad daylight, but something about it felt darker than midnight. When I asked why he was recording it all, his answer was simple but profound. Some stories need to be remembered so they don't have to be repeated, I added. And some need to be told so others know they're not alone. As a new family arrived in Promise Creek with rumors of trouble following them, Hope and Samuel exchanged a look of recognition. The chain of compassion would continue, extending beyond the boundaries of Ravenwood Ranch. The true worth of a person, we had learned, is measured not in gold coins, but in the courage to see value where others see only burden, a lesson paid for dearly, but worth every cost. In the end, what truly measures a person's worth isn't the gold in their pocket or the land they own, but the courage to recognize value where others see only burden. Sometimes the deepest wounds become the source of our greatest compassion, allowing us to reach across time and circumstance to offer others what we ourselves once desperately needed. The transactions we make in life, what we give, what we take, what we sacrifice, ultimately reveal who we truly are. Some debts can never be repaid directly, but can be honored by extending the same mercy to others, creating an unbroken chain of compassion that outlasts us. Perhaps true healing comes not from escaping our past, but from transforming it into something that serves the future. The scars we carry need not define us. They can instead remind us of promises we've made to ourselves about the kind of world we wish to build. In the harsh territories of both land and heart, justice and mercy sometimes travel unexpected paths, but when they finally meet, they create something rare and precious, the chance to begin again with dignity intact and hope renewed. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss our next tale of redemption and resilience. Until next time, remember that every ending carries the seeds of a new beginning.